So it's no secret that I've been gone from YouTube for a while. What can I say? I've been busy. What have I been doing? Well, lately, I've been busy winning competitions. A few weeks ago, I won Minnesota Cube Day 2022 with a 7.52 3x3 average, and the craziest part is that I did it after an entire month of not practicing 3x3. So in this video, I'm going to go over how I did it, and then what you can learn from it and what I can learn from it in order to compete better in the future. So this story actually starts at the competition I went to before this one, the one I went to in Columbus in early April. Before that competition, I practiced a ton of 3x3, but it didn't go anywhere. I did really poorly in all three of my averages despite all of my practice. But what I did succeed at was one-handed, even though I didn't practice for that at all. I got my crazy 8.64 one-handed official solve and a couple really nice averages. And because of that, all of my practice in the month after that was exclusively one-handed. Anytime I was doing any sort of two-handed solves, all I could really think is how much I would rather be doing one-handed. And I did that even though I knew I had this Minnesota competition coming up, and that didn't have one-handed. In fact, I didn't sit down and do any serious 3x3 practice with two hands until the day before I left for this competition. With that in mind, I obviously had to change my expectations for how well I would do here. And I was talking about this with my dad on the drive up to the competition. I said that one of two things would probably end up happening. Possibility one, because I did so little 3x3 practice leading up to it, I would be really rusty and I would do a lot worse than normal in my averages. This is obviously the most reasonable and the most likely expectation. Possibility two, because I hadn't been doing much practice and because of how much I'd been practicing one-handed, I would train my mind to think that I didn't care about 3x3. And because I didn't care, I would be less nervous and that would let me do better than I was expecting. I know that sounds crazy, but it's happened to me before. At a comp in St. Louis a few years ago, I got the PB one-handed average I wanted right before 3x3 finals, and that let me not care about 3x3 anymore. Because of that, I was way less nervous and I was able to get a PB 3x3 average right afterwards. So those are my two options, and based on how 3x3 round 1 started, it was pretty clear which one was happening. I don't have any footage of my solves at this competition, but let me walk you through what happened as well as I can. First solve is going okay, nothing great or anything, solid F2L, and then I get to last layer and my turning goes to utter crap. Then I get a GB perm, which I have stubbornly tried to do a really hard execution on for years, and it never works in competition, and it didn't work this time, and I get an 8.25. The same thing happens on solve 2. I start off decent enough, and then my last layer gets bad, and I get a GC perm, lock up like crazy, and come away with an 8.31. The last three solves were more of the same. Decent F2L into a V perm that I locked up on, and then +2'd, the worst Z perm execution of my life, and then a really awesome U perm in the back that I failed worse than I have in years. In fact, I would call it the second worst U perm I've ever had in competition. This 886 average was the worst 3x3 average I've had in competition in over 2 years, but at least I took it in stride. The first thing I did after the round was over was walk up to my dad and say, well, I can't be mad at that based on how little I practiced for this. And that's definitely a much healthier perspective than getting mad. But what happened? I definitely did poorly, but it clearly wasn't for the reasons that I thought it would be. I wasn't rusty. I can't claim to be rusty after getting high 6 and low 7 averages while warming up that morning. What went wrong was my turning, and my turning was bad because I had nerves. This is one of the key things I learned from this competition. I'm really bad at pretending that I don't care. The only reason that not caring worked at the St. Louis competition was that I legitimately, honestly didn't care. Here, I was trying to tell myself that I didn't care, but I actually did, and I was still getting nervous. And because I was nervous, I was solving in a way that I normally wouldn't. Normally when I'm in the zone, I turn pretty fast, and I can keep that up pretty fluidly. But for whatever reason, competing makes me go into a safety mode where I turn way slower and try to make up for it with look ahead, yet I still lock up way more. For months leading up to the Columbus competition I went to in early April, I was really careful about practicing the exact way that I would compete. I used a cup as a cube cover, I would make sure that I didn't know the orientation of the cube ahead of time, and I would do a ton of comp sim averages. I was so focused on practicing the way I would compete that I didn't make sure I was competing the way I would practice. And that's why all my 3x3 practice for Columbus didn't pay off. I was solving in a completely different way than the way I was practicing. So for round 2, I set a goal to fix that, and it definitely paid off. Going into round 2, I still didn't have a single sub 8 3x3 solve for this competition, and objective number 1 was to fix that. My first solve had really nice F2L, which really benefited from an easy first pair. And that all led me to the last layer. I started off just doing the regular OLL, and then I stopped myself so I could do the COLL. I tend to suck at this COLL execution in competition, but I still think that it was pretty worth it. It led to this easy U-perm, so even with that subpar last layer, I got a 715. There we go, my first sub 8 of the competition. And then, the second scramble was really easy. There's an entire solved block on yellow that is easy to turn into an X-cross, and it gives you another free pair as well. But I blew it. Somehow I messed up and I did like 5 F2L pairs, and that ended up giving me an 850. It's unfortunate, but all I can do is move on and take it in stride. I honestly remember very little about Solve 3, but what I do remember is that I got a 712. What a turnaround this was already. I went from not getting a single sub 8 in round 1 to having a counting 7.1 after 3 solves on round 2. Solve 4 was the smoothest one of all, and I was able to take advantage of a free pair and an easy last layer, and I ended up getting a 693. At this point, I'm in a crazy situation. I haven't practiced 3x3 in a month, and here I am at Solve 5 of my average with a possibility of getting a PB. My PR average at this point was 740, and I have a counting 712 and a 715. And to make things even crazier, Solve 5 started off amazing. I had an easy X-cross, a nice second pair, and then 2 free pairs. And in my mind, I'm going, yes, this is it, PR average time. But I couldn't pull it through. My hands just turned to jello and my turning went to crap. I had a bad OLL execution and then a terrible F-perm, and I got an 809. That landed me at a 745 average, 0.05 seconds behind my PR. But still, what a comeback. Going from getting my worst average in years to getting an average 0.05 off of my PR in the very next round, I'm super proud of that. The final round was more of the same. I had to come back from unfortunate circumstances, most notably a corner twist on Solve 1 that gave me an 868. But I followed that up with a 689, a 704 with an F-perm, and a 784 with another F-perm. Despite my lack of practice and my absolute dud of a round 1, here I am on Solve 5 with PR potential for the second round in a row. And I didn't know it at the time, but I needed an 831 or better on this last solve to win. The cases weren't ideal on this solve, so I never really had potential of getting that PR average, but it was going well enough regardless. And then I got to my PLL, and I have a V-perm. This is the case that I failed on and got a +2 on in round 1, a real test of whether or not I've gotten my mojo back. And I frickin' nailed it. Boom, 769 and I've done it. A 752 average and I won the competition. My first competition victory in 2 years and my first victory at a really stacked competition since 2018. So how did I do it? How did I end up winning this competition? Well, first of all, it really helped that Brian Johnson didn't show up that day. He could have absolutely destroyed me at any point there. But other than that, I really set myself up to succeed. I took my failures in stride and I learned from them. I figured out what it would take to get a good solve, and I reminded myself to do those things before every single attempt. So based on this experience, here is my advice for all of you. Obviously, don't go a whole month without practicing if you want to do well at a competition. That should be pretty intuitive. But other than that, be honest with yourself about how much you care. If you don't care, then whatever. But if you do care, then set yourself up to succeed, and if you can't, then manage your expectations. And most importantly, practice the way you'll compete, and make sure you're going to compete the way you practice. Thank you all so much for watching this video. You just witnessed the return of BrodytheCuber, and I'm hoping to make this return as exciting as possible for all of you. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, ring the bell, do all of that. I'm hoping to be a lot more consistent this summer and for the foreseeable future with the videos. So if you're going to see them, click the bell, do all that so you get the notifications. I'll see you guys later, and I hope you have a great day. This is Brody, signing out.